Hi, Hope.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
so much. It's great to be here, Steve.
Thank you. And Brittany, nice to meet you for the first time.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to speak to both of you. And I guess maybe we could just get started. If you could both just take a minute just to tell us what you've been doing for the last 15, 20 years and what you currently do, and just get us up to speed of who you are, what you're focused on. That would be great. You could start, Hope.
All right. Well, I have been vegan myself for 33 years now and been doing animal advocacy and vegan education for about that same amount of time, about 3 decades. I worked for national nonprofits for a good amount of that time. I've actually worked for In Defense of Animals, where Brittany is now, long ago. And I also worked with United Poultry Concerns. I have started my own organization. I'm now the executive director of Compassionate Living that just started last year. And very excited to work on the projects like the Humane Hoax, which my book is about, that we'll talk about, I'm sure, the Humane Hoax Project, and my podcast, Hope for the Animals podcast. So doing some exciting new things that have just started within the last couple of years.
So what is the website for people to find you after this lecture is over? How would they find you?
Sure. Compassionate-living.org is my organization. There's also humanehoax.org. That's the Humane Hoax Project.
Can we bring that up for a second, the compassionate one? Just say that one more time, the compassion.
Compassionate-living.org.
We could bring that up just so we could show everyone and she could point out where we should go. Okay, so where would someone go here to sign up and to get more information?
Well, you can go to our contact page and that gets in touch with us. So yeah, and we're working on a pop-up that would come up to sign up on our e-news list. We don't quite have that yet. But you can always just contact me and I will put you on the e-news list.
Okay, great. And Brittany, the same thing. What have you been doing for the last 15 years? And can you bring us up to speed about yourself?
Sure. Well, I am much newer to the movement than Hope. I have been doing animal rights activism since mid-2015, but I have done lots of activism since then in a variety of ways. And so I feel like I've put in a lot of time and effort into the movement within that time. I was a teacher and I had the unique opportunity to be able to teach some activism and social justice type classes in a private program in Southern California before I relocated. I was a writing instructor, and I also, because it was a private program that catered to teachers' interests and passions, I was able to teach kids some activism and social justice, which was a great opportunity. Then in November of 2021, I relocated from the Los Angeles area to Tucson, Arizona. And at that time, I started working for In Defense of Animals. Before, I had just been doing activism with different groups and just as a volunteer thing. But then about a year and a half ago, started this paid position in the movement. And I founded Desert Oasis Turtle and Tortoise Sanctuary. It's a micro sanctuary here on my property for rescued turtles and tortoises. And then my book, Voices for Animal Liberation, it's an anthology that was published in March 2020. Prior to the publication of the book, I had been writing short pieces and had those published in different places, literary sites, and online journals. And so this is my first and only book so far. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here and happy to be connected with all these amazing speakers. So thanks again for having me.
Great. And Hope, did you already come out with a new book, or are you coming out with it? What's the status?
Right now it is available. It just came out late April. It's called The Humane Hoax. I see that someone in the chat asked for the name of the books, and mine is The Humane Hoax. And the subtitle is Essays Exposing the Myth of Happy Meat, Humane Dairy and Ethical Eggs. And I'm right now in the midst of my book launch. So I'm doing appearances and podcasts and all kinds of things around the book. So yeah, it is out and available on Amazon, or you can get it directly from the publisher, Lantern Publishing and Media.
And what is the reason that you wrote another book? You had already written a book years ago. So why did you decide to write another book? What's different about this book than the first one?
Yeah, my first book was released actually 10 years ago. That book is called The Ultimate Betrayal: Is There Happy Meat? It was the very first book on the issue of humane washing, what I call the humane hoax. Some people call it the humane myth. And, so what happened was, I've been doing this work a long time, and back, 30 years ago or so, in the 90s, early 2000s, you didn't see humane labels like you do now. You would see labels maybe like fresh or young on meat, but suddenly we started, and I believe that this is because the activists and vegans were starting to be successful. We were bringing to attention and bringing to light these horrible things and issues that were happening to animals in animal agriculture, environmental impact, other issues, and people were starting to really question the animal sector, right? The animal farming sector. We were making progress. And so that animal industry, they have very clever marketers, they have wonderful advertisers, and they started doing advertising and labeling that was meant to really appease and reassure consumers that things were improving, right? So we started seeing labels like cage-free and free range and certified humane, things like that. And I found that this was very interesting. I started looking into it. I felt that this was something that was going to continue and potentially be an issue, a problem for our goal of ending farmed animal suffering, that these labels could possibly lull people into believing that there was a kind way to commodify animals. And so I started researching for my first book. I actually went to these farms. I went to cage-free farms. I went to free-range egg facilities. I went to organic dairies. This is back, 15 years ago, 12, 15 years ago, when you could just walk right onto a farm and have a talk with the farmers and the workers. And I did that extensively. And what I found was very disturbing and very disheartening. And I found that these labels meant very little. They're unregulated. And the situation, it's farm by farm and situation by situation, but overall, it means very, very little. These labels, very, very little improvement, very, very little for the animals. And in some instances, it can be a wash. There's no difference, or it can be even worse. So I go into great detail about that in my first book. And since then, that was 10 years ago, now, it's just grown. This labeling and marketing has just taken off. Now we're seeing it everywhere. You don't just see it at the health food store anymore. Now, you see cage-free eggs at your local coffee shop and in the grocery stores. So it has definitely grown. And I decided that because it wasn't only me speaking about it anymore, now there were numerous voices in the animal advocacy arena that were speaking about it. I decided to start compiling essays. And this is an anthology of 18 amazing authors, academics, animal activists, rescuers, and there's moving stories of individual animals that are actually the victims of the humane hoax. Some incredible information. There's a whole greenwashing section that talks about regenerative grazing and the grass-fed and free range and all of that. So I'm just really thrilled and excited that it has come out. I wrote the introduction and the conclusion and a chapter in the book, but there's some amazing contributors. Carol Adams wrote a chapter, Silesh Rao, Robert Carrillo, Christopher Sol Eubanks, Joanne Kong, Karen Davis, some real legends in our movement. So I'm very excited about it, and it's done really well. Just to wrap up, it was actually #1 on Amazon's new releases in the animal rights category for the first week it was out. So it's really resonating with people, which is fantastic. And I'm very excited.
Could we bring that book up you could bring it up on Amazon. Could we show everyone what that book looks like, just in case people are inclined to want to get more information about it. Where should we get the book if we want it? On Amazon or on your website? What's better for you?
Well, I would encourage you to buy it directly from the publisher and support them, Lantern Publishing and Media. They're an all-vegan, amazing publishing house. So please support them if you can, or you can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles, wherever you buy your books.
Okay, are we able to pull that up now? Or if not, we'll come back to that. Guess we'll come back to that. Okay. Brittany, why did you compile the book Voices for Animal Liberation, Inspirational Accounts by Animal Rights Activists? What made you decide to go forward with putting together a whole book? And what was that book about? And again, what made you decide to do it, and what was it about?
Yeah, thank you. So this is an anthology with 27 contributors plus myself. And as Hope mentioned about her anthology, I wrote the introduction and the closing. My story is in the book, and then I compiled all of the other stories and helped my contributors shape them and edited them. And I had submitted a book proposal to publishers, and this is published by Skyhorse Publishing, which is based in New York. And it's a mainstream publisher. One great thing about Skyhorse is that their distribution is through Simon & Schuster. So that is just a great thing to have for the book. It is available through Skyhorse Publishing on Amazon or anywhere else, where you buy books. You can check and see where it's available, just Googling the title. But yeah, the distribution has been good for the book in terms of various outlets. I put it together because I really felt strongly that there needed to be an anthology in the movement that focuses on activism and the different forms and styles of activism within our movement, because it's so diverse. There are vigils where activists bear witness to suffering animals. There are protests, there's direct action, there are so many forms of outreach and just a whole variety. And I felt like I wanted that to be represented in an anthology that would just cover the bases of the animal rights movement. And so I have some newer voices in the book and some established. I really wanted there to be a mix of longtime folks in the movement and then newer folks, so that there's just a nice variety represented and a nice sense of diversities. And there are 6 sections in the book, and it covers, like I said, different areas of activism. So the first section starts out with seasoned warriors inspiring and transforming. The last section of the book focuses on sanctuary and rescue, and there's everything in between. So it offers the words of both new and highly influential voices in the movement, with the intention of inspiring and educating those who are sparked by the vision of a more ethical world. And it touches on the environment and health, certainly. I mean, we know the benefits of veganism for the planet and our own health, but what it mainly focuses on is ethics for the animals and justice for the animals, and that's its primary focus. But of course, it's all related and it's all one big package. So when we are vegan, it impacts everything and everyone, and really it's just all connected. So yeah, the book was published in March 2020, and I feel grateful that I was able to secure a publisher for it, and the response has been really great. Unfortunately, the book was released right at the start of the pandemic. So it was released on March 3rd, and my book release party, which was a wonderful event in Santa Monica, California, was on March 7th. And the following week, everything shut down. So it was an interesting time to have a new book, especially because it's my first book. out in the world. I wasn't able to participate in, events and conferences and things. Everything was just stopped and canceled, postponed, and so forth. But anyway, the reception has been wonderful, and I feel grateful for all of the support. And I hope that everybody will check it out and take a look online. And yeah, that's
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question, but I just want to see, can you just flash up Hope's book so just people could see that one also? Okay, so this one is her brand new book that just came out last week. Okay, so now let's get to the punchline question. If you surround yourself with nice, friendly people at vegan conferences, they're going to come up to you and they're going to go, I think you guys are wonderful. I love you. I love your book. And I like you guys very much, but this isn't Stephen, Hope, and Brittany's world. We share it with 7 billion people. And what people on the outside, people might smile and be friendly, but on the inside, people usually do what's good for them. I'm sorry if that's a little cynical or negative, but people seem to make decisions that are in their highest good, regardless of what they say. So for all the people out there who are saying to themselves, yeah, I don't know, I got a lot to worry about. I can't worry about animals. I can't worry about how animals are treated. What's in it for them? Why should a person care about how pigs and cows and chickens and fish are treated? Assume that a person is not as emotional or not as open or not as compassionate. Why should the average person, I care, I find it outrageous and horrifying, but a lot of people, again, this isn't my world. So why should people who are out there, the hundreds of millions of people, why should they care what we are doing to animals, how we raise them, how we torture them, how we kill them, what's in it for them? Why does it matter to them? Why does it matter to a selfish person?
Okay, I guess I'll start. Wow, that's a hard question to start with. Let's see. So numerous thoughts come up for me. One is that, I truly believe, and perhaps it's, my name and my nature, but I truly believe that people do actually care. I don't think that anyone wants to harm animals. I think that if we get onto a basic level of, that no one really wants to cause harm to animals, right? No one would consciously, at least most people, let's say, wouldn't consciously hurt an animal. The reason that they do is that it's convenient, it's natural, it's normal, it's everywhere, right? That's why they do it. And I think that ultimately people, I do have hope that people will see the light and will make the change once they are educated. The other thought I have on that is that we don't need everyone. We really don't. We need those caring people like Brittany, like you, like Steve, like us, to grow. And there's more of us, there's more growing all the time, more people getting interested all the time, more people that care when they hear about these things. Education is so important, getting the information out, because there are people that do care. There are people that will make change in their life, that will go to the store with that consciousness and make good choices. And we just have to get the information to them. And once that grows, if we can get the default to be vegan, this is this wonderful new thing that's happening where we're trying to get people to entities like cafeterias and other places to have the default be vegan, then I think it's going to be so much easier for people to make that choice, right? To just choose vegan if it's easy, if it's convenient. As long as we can do that, it's going to spread, it's going to get bigger, it's going to, that kind of movement will start to grow. And the other thing too, I think that is a huge factor though, is bringing it back to the animals, bringing it back to individual stories of animals. It's good to have stats and figures and talk about all that, but to connect individually with an animal, like on a sanctuary, and hearing those individual stories, I think that is going to get people to care. They love companion animals. Many people now are having companion animals, dogs, cats, pot-bellied pigs, all kinds of animals now, ferrets. People are bringing animals into their lives, into their homes, and they love those animals. And as long as we can show them that the pigs, the chickens, the turkeys, the cows that are in these horrible systems, that they suffer just as their companion animal would, they're going to connect to that. And so I think that a big part of it is speciesism, really, is trying to break that and debunk that that human superiority complex, right, that we have, that we feel that we are the only species that matters. And we know now that the animals suffer, they feel pain, they have emotion, they have individual personalities, they're clever, they're funny, there's all kinds of different personalities. And we now know this from living with animals on sanctuaries. So ultimately, I'll just wrap it up by saying that I think people do care. I hope that people do care. And I think that once the information gets more widespread, these stories get out about individual animals, their sentience, their emotion, their desire to live free of human imposed suffering, then people will care, at least enough people that will spread that change.
Yeah, just to echo what you're saying, Hope, I agree with everything you have said. And I do feel that with the animals aside, which that's my primary focus, is the animals and the treatment of animals and how unjust and unethically they are treated. And so, first and foremost, animals deserve the right to their lives. They deserve justice. They deserve to live free from harm at the core, at a base level. But in addition to that, we have the environment, which is huge, and our planet is being faced with crisis. And we have our own health. And so for the people that maybe are not inclined towards compassion for animals, or they're just not going to connect on that level of animals deserve justice, they're individuals, they're sentient beings. If people can't wrap their mind around speciesism and that aspect of the whole picture, then we can appeal to them on an environmental and health. I mean, it all is connected. So it really all is so very important. And our planet is suffering greatly. We need the world to shift to vegan for so many reasons. We need a vegan world. And so I think that those areas are very important as well. There are, all the studies that show the harm that animal products cause to human health and the immense harm that the animal agriculture industry causes to the planet. I mean, for so many reasons and on so many levels. So
that's a great point. Great point, Brittany. Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys have more experience in this than me. So let me ask you this question. Do you think it's helpful to explain to people how they treat cows, pigs, chickens, dairy cows? In other words, I kind of feel like I'd like to explain it in detail, but I don't know. Is this something that you think is helpful? Does it traumatize people? Like, I kind of feel like if you don't even want to hear about it, then that's even more reason why we shouldn't be doing it. But are you okay to explain how they're treating animals? Or from your experience, is this not a technique that you feel is part of what you want to communicate?
I mean, I'm all for it. I
Okay.
think that we need transparency. We need transparency in the food system. We need transparency in society in general. And so as an avid animal rights activist, I'm all about speaking the truth and just letting people know what the animals are going through. Because I know if I were in their position, if I were that cow, on a dairy farm, if I was that mother pig in a gestation crate, or that chicken being trampled on the ground in a crowded facility, I mean, I would want someone to speak up for me, and I would want someone to tell the truth, not sugarcoat things, not try to downplay it, but just speak the honest truth about what is happening to these animals. It's 2023, and there is no reason that this kind of situation should be happening to innocent animals for so many reasons. And first and foremost, as I said, the animals themselves, the cruelty they face is unimaginable. I can't imagine for 1 minute, being in their position and going through what they go through. So I'm all for just being open and honest. If people don't want to hear it, they'll make it clear they don't want to hear it. And then, there's certain ways to have conversations, and there's certain ways to open the door to those conversations so that it's not you're not alienating people. But I do think that at the core, we have an obligation for the animals to speak up for them. They cannot do it for themselves. They can't go out and hold a protest. They cannot speak up for themselves. So we need to do it. And I feel very strongly about that obligation as a human being on this planet that we share with all earthlings.
Okay, so a family of four, a very nice family, very conscious, very caring. They go out to a diner, and one person has a cheeseburger, and the next person has chicken, and the third person has salmon. And the fourth person just has an egg omelet, and they're just very happy there, and everyone in the diner is eating the same types of food. So tell me about the cheeseburger. What happened? How was that cow treated? How is the, let's add pork to it. So how is the pig treated? How is the chicken treated? How are these animals being treated? Because, the cartons don't look so bad, and, I don't know, not everyone understands it. So tell us about what it's like to be a cow raised for beef, a chicken raised for chicken, a fish raised for fish, a turkey for turkey, a cow, a pig raised for pork. Take us through what their life is like.
Go ahead, Hope.
Okay, well, it's big to have them all.
You're one at a time, I guess, whatever's best.
Yeah, I guess I'll focus in on chickens. We'll start with chickens. And of course, chickens are terribly genetically bred now. They are genetically bred for different traits. And there's really two different types of chickens that are raised in the industry now. One is focused on getting really heavy quickly to be killed for their flesh. The other is for laying eggs. They're genetically bred to lay eggs. And so there's two really different kinds, and they have very different experiences. So I'll start with the chickens that are raised for flesh. They live very short lives. It's interesting that a lot of people say, "Oh, I'd never eat veal because veal's a baby." It's a veal is a baby cow. It's a very young cow. Well, all of them are very young. They're all slaughtered at a very, very young age. Chickens raised for their flesh, they're weeks or months old when they are slaughtered, and they get fat and full so quickly. They're fattened up. Their breast is so huge. And right away they start having problems because they are so genetically manipulated. They will be too heavy to hold their weight. Sometimes they get arthritis, pain in their legs. Their legs will snap underneath them because they can't hold their own weight. And they're just weeks and months old. It's horrifying what we've done to their little bodies. And they live in filthy, overcrowded, horrible conditions. It's miserable. It's not only physically distressing, but psychologically distressing. And, they're slaughtered at a very young age, and slaughter is a horrible, brutal process. So that's what a chicken goes through who is raised for meat, flesh. And egg laying, it's just as bad. Often the industry standard is battery cages, where birds are just crammed into cages, stacked on top of one another. It would be like living your whole life in a crowded elevator. You know how uncomfortable being in a crowded elevator is. Imagine if that's all the space you had to live. And that is what it's like to be in these cages. Now the industry is moving away from the battery cages into cage free. But what I'd like to say about that, and that's what I get into in the book, is these kind of more humane labeling that's going on. And we've done a really wonderful job as vegans and as animal advocates exposing the horrors of these battery cages. And it's true, they're awful. And I feel that we can all agree that any little bit of relief is worth it. Of course, let's get them out of the cages. I would never say that we shouldn't get them out of the cages. But the problem with a label like cage-free eggs is that it funnels all of the animal welfare, all the welfare issues into this one thing, the confinement, the size of the confinement in the cage. But there's so many other things that they endure. At the heartless hatcheries where they're born, they come into the world not with a mother hen. I mean, how would it be natural for a chicken to come into the world? It would be in a nest with a warm mother hen's body next to her. And do you know that actually chickens in the egg, they can communicate with their mom, clucking and cooing while they're developing in the egg. There's this wonderful bond that happens. That is all completely denied. They are never in a nest. They're never with their moms. The eggs are separated. They're hatched in these metal drawers. They're immediately thrown about like canned goods on conveyor belts. It's brutal. And in these hatcheries where they're born, there's so many that die that don't even make it to the slaughterhouse because of the intensive, horrible conditions where they're just being thrown around. They get caught in the machinery. It's absolutely awful. And then, of course, on the other end, the slaughtering experience is brutal as well. So the problem with a label like cage-free eggs is that all of the welfare concerns get kind of funneled into this one thing, and everything else is ignored. All the other horrors of their life is ignored with this label that seems like, like they're living a good life. Oh, cage-free eggs, they must be living a stress-free, wonderful life. No, not necessarily at all. In fact, I know for sure not. So we have to keep educating about these labels, what they mean, what the truth is, and that's why I wrote the book, The Humane Hoax. But yeah, eggs. I'll just to wrap up with the eggs. People often ask me, well, what's the best egg to buy, or which brand should I get? There is like I said in the beginning, the labels are unregulated. There is so little oversight, so little, nobody is looking into this stuff. And from one to the other, you just don't know what's happening on that farm. You really don't. And, it is, it's really, I feel it's a waste of your money. Don't waste your money, because we're just sending the industry a message that that we can that it's cage-free, free range, all these labels, it means so little. It means nothing. Really, the only humane alternative, the only humane option is to forego eggs, to not buy eggs, and or reduce your egg consumption and go vegan. It's really the only humane option.
Is it true that just 1 second, the male chickens or egg-laying chickens, are they thrown away? Can you clarify what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge part of it, are the roosters, the males. And in one of the chapters, actually, in this book, the second chapter that was written by Alistair Van Cleek, it's called the something like the horrible truths of backyard chicken keeping. But but he's talking about the entire egg industry. Whenever you see hens, even if it's a backyard situation where there's 8 hens giving eggs, or it's a whole building full of cage-free chickens with thousands of birds in these indoor windowless warehouses where they're crammed on top of one another and still don't see the light of day, are breathing the ammonia of their waste. I mean, cage-free, there's a lot of horrors that they still endure. But you have to say, where are their brothers? Where are the males? For every one hen, there's a male that suffered and died or was abandoned at the hatcheries. They get killed by the millions. They're thrown away in the dumpsters out back to suffocate and die because, again, it's that genetic strand of egg-laying hens. They only want the females. The males don't profitably grow. They don't grow fast enough to profitably be slaughtered for meat. So they're
also ground up alive, the males. In
Right.
some facilities, it's industry standard to actually put the male chicks in a macerator. They're ground alive, which when people find that out, they're horrified. I mean, grinding up baby, cute little fuzzy chicks.
Yeah.
So that yes, everything you're saying, Hope. I would like to say something about the dairy industry when you're finished with.
Yeah. Just wrapping up. That's such a good point. And like Brittany was saying, these are these sweet little animals that we really in our culture, we see them on Easter cards, and they're seen in these beautiful in children's nurseries, fluffy, sweet little animals. And what we're doing to them that people don't know behind closed doors, this brutal slaughter of these innocent little babies. It is really horrible. So you have to think, where are their brothers whenever you're talking about hens in the egg industry? But yeah, Steve, you want to talk about the dairy industry?
Well, yeah, the dairy industry is, I mean, it's all huge for me, and every form, every type of exploitation. But the dairy industry is one that has duped the public for so many decades with the whole idea that humans need cow's milk for their bones, for calcium, for these nutrients, when it's like, if we really stop and think about it, why would we need the milk of another species to have strong bones and to thrive? There are not any other species in the animal kingdom that are drinking the milk of other species. They all drink the milk of their own species. So the dairy industry just really infuriates me. That's the word. Because not only have they led the public to believe that cow's milk is necessary for humans, but they also absolutely throw out those humane labels and this misperception of dairy in a big way. So on cartons and packaging, we see in the grocery stores, there are green fields. There's, a cow grazing. It looks like just a happy picture where the cows are outside, and there's all these different labels that make it sound like cows who are used for their milk are living a nice life, and they're milked, and then their milk is used, and that's it, and then the story ends. But the reality is that female cows, when they're done producing dairy, when their bodies can no longer produce anymore and they're spent, their bodies are literally spent, they're hauled off to slaughter. So they end up being killed anyways when they're no longer of use to the dairy industry. Not only that, but their babies are taken away from them after birth, because otherwise the babies would be consuming the milk that the dairy industry wants to sell to humans. So, and this is one that comes up about, humane dairy, like humane certified and organic dairy, and all these labels. And the fact of the matter is, whether it's organic or whatever the labels are, the babies are still taken from the mothers, because that is just industry standard, so that the milk can be bottled up and packaged and sold. So the babies, and it's traumatic, the mother cows, they carry their babies for 9 months, same as humans. And then they give birth, and then their babies are taken away from them. And I mean, there is documentation and footage that shows the trauma that they undergo, and the noise they make. And the mother cows are frantic. They're looking for their babies. The babies are bellowing. The mothers are bellowing. I mean, it's really just an awful thing to do. And so a lot of people, they just have no idea what's really going on behind the scenes of the dairy industry. And also the male calves, like Hope was saying about male chicks, the male calves in the dairy industry are of no use to it. And so they are sent off to be slaughtered for veal. And they have no place in the dairy industry. So it's a very discriminatory industry, animal agriculture. These animals are just used and abused and then discarded. And mother cows are just, thrown out like trash to be slaughtered when they cannot produce any more milk. So it's just, it's really upsetting, to know what the industry is doing to these animals, all the while they're completely misleading the public and really lying to the public about this and about the reality. So yeah, it's very aggravating.
Just to clarify one thing, a lot of people have the thought that cows produce milk. Is it true that a cow produces milk, or does only a pregnant cow produce milk? And if it's only a pregnant cow, how does a pregnant cow pregnant so much? And how do they keep getting pregnant?
Yeah, well, they only a pregnant cow will produce milk. Lactating mothers produce milk. So cows do not magically produce milk. They need to be pregnant and they give birth to a calf. They are artificially inseminated in the dairy industry, in the mainstream dairy industry, that causes them to, overproduce. And so that's why they become spent at an age that is far younger than their natural lifespan. Their bodies are overworked, they're overproduced. They produce one calf after the next until, they wear out. And Hope, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the artificial insemination, people have no idea how horrible and invasive, and really it's I would say it is a sexual assault on these cows. It's really awful what they do. It's kind of hard to describe. If you should go to a video of artificial insemination and see what they do, but I'll just briefly describe. They actually put their arm into the cow's rectum, far down all the way to the person's shoulder, to manipulate inside the cow. And then they put a sperm gun in, a very long metal rod in with the sperm, shoot the sperm in, and they're manipulating to get it. It's really horrible. And to think that this is what we have to do for our food, it makes no sense. So manipulative, so invasive. And it's really, I think it's a cow's Me Too moment. I mean, it's absolutely sexual violation of these poor cows.
Okay, and what about beef? Like just not milk and dairy and not chicken and eggs, but just a regular hamburger. I see cows sitting out in fields eating grass. Is what that doesn't seem so bad. So tell me what's wrong with the whole industry that produces my hamburger?
Well, I guess I'll start. So beef cows, it's interesting that people will want to stop eating beef kind of the first thing, right? It's always like, oh, well, I'll stop red meat first. But the cows endure suffering as well. They are, branded, castrated, all without anesthesia, of course. Any procedure, any painful manipulative procedure they do to these cows or any of the animals, they don't use anesthesia. That would cost extra money. So they have painful mutilations that happen to them. And again, they're slaughtered at a very young age. Cows are slaughtered at about a year old. So they get maybe 1 year of life. That's about it. A little less, a little more. So again, they don't have a whole lot of life to live when they could live 20, 25 years. It's stealing so much of their life. And I'd love to talk about the turkeys too. I don't want them to be forgotten. Turkeys are so often forgotten. There's kind of the three big ones, cows, chickens, pigs, and the turkeys don't get talked about, but there's, billions of turkeys that are killed around the world every year for their flesh. And we seem to only think about them at Thanksgiving. So I definitely want to acknowledge them. And something that people don't realize with turkeys, yes, fish too. I'm seeing that in the in the chat. Absolutely. We should talk more about fish. And I actually, my whole presentation at this conference last year was about fish. So you should definitely check that out. But turkeys, two things that are unique to turkeys that people don't realize is one is the detowing. So we hear about debeaking, where they slice off a portion of the chicken's beak. Chickens are debeaked often, where they slice off a portion of their beak. It's very painful with like a hot solder blade. Beaks are very sensitive, nerve-rich areas of their body sometimes, and this happens to turkeys as well, the debeaking. So chickens and turkeys are debeaked. But turkeys are also detowed, where they actually cut off a portion of their toes. And that is because turkeys have talons, like long nails. And when they're stressed, when they're scared, they will use their talons to defend themselves. And so they will use their talons against the workers or other turkeys if they're and they certainly are confined over, it's completely overcrowded and confined. They're thrown about and tossed about. And so they use their talons to defend themselves. So when they're just babies, they cut a portion of their toes off. It's called detowing, and they'll use just crude implements, like sometimes like shears, like that you cut a gardening tool, or you cut branches, a branch cutter, anything, scissors, they'll use whatever. And it's incredibly painful. And I've seen turkeys from free-range turkey farms that have been detowed, and their poor little feet just look like stumps, and they're limping around, unable to walk naturally. It is horrible. So the detowing is terrible in turkeys. The other thing that's unique to turkeys is that they also are artificially inseminated. They cannot mate naturally anymore. They've been so genetically manipulated. The males are so huge, their breast is so huge for meat, that they would crush the females if they allowed them to mate naturally. So they separate the males and females, and they artificially inseminate them. They, extract the semen, you can imagine what that is, from the males, and then insert it into the females. And this is such a violation. They have to turn the poor female turkey upside down to open her vent. It's got to be so scary and frightening, and not knowing what's going on, and then they insert the semen into her. So just some horrible things that people have no idea. I mean, these are details that the average consumer and people don't know, and they need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody has a right to know what, where their food is coming from, and who they're eating, right? Who, not what. So this is not a hamburger, a hot dog. This is a cow and a pig. These labels, these food item names that end up on menus are just covering who they are. They are cows and pigs, and they do not deserve any of what they're subjected to. So people really do have a right to know what is going on in the food system. Like I said earlier, transparency and truth, and knowing that the hot dog or the hamburger they're eating comes from torture, and it's just not acceptable. So we really need to escalate the transparency big time and make sure that people are aware of, like I said, who they're eating and where these animals come from that end up on their plates.
What about fish, though? Because a couple of things, haven't people always lived on fish, and don't we need fish to feed the world? And even better, if we grow them in fish ponds out of the oceans, isn't that like much more, it doesn't hurt the ocean as much? So why not? People might say, I understand why we don't want to eat beef and chicken and pork, because we mistreat the animals, but what's so bad about eating fish?
Well, I'll say one thing. Well, I'll say something on this, and then Hope, if you want to talk about the fish farms or just the the farming of fish, you probably have a lot more info on that than I do. But what I would like to say is about our oceans. Our oceans are in dire condition like the rest of the environment. You know, our planet is really in crisis. And so overfishing of our oceans is causing problems on so many levels. There are the trawlers, the giant ships that go out and, you know, bring in all of the fish and the shrimp and crabs and the bottom dwellers and all of that. And when those trawlers are bringing in their catch, there's bycatch. So dolphins and sea turtles and other sea life are absolutely impacted, injured, and killed by the fishing industry in our oceans. Also, the overfishing is just depleting the fish life, and the ecosystem is really suffering because of overfishing and the damage it's causing to the ocean. And I believe there's a scientific theory that the oceans could be fishless by 2048. If anyone can validate that year, I believe it's 2048. At the rate we're going, that's the theory with the science and the studies, at the rate that the fishing industry is going and all of the issues associated with it and just the devastation. So there's that. I mean, there are other animals in the ocean that are caught up in this. And of course, the suffering of the fish themselves that are being caught for to be sold for consumption. It's an awful industry, and I highly recommend everybody watch Seaspiracy, because Seaspiracy will give all of the important facts and information. It's a documentary by the same guys that did Cowspiracy and What the Health, and it's very eye-opening. I mean, I thought I knew about like the oceans and the fishing industry to some degree, but when I saw that documentary, I learned so much. So I really recommend that. And then Hope, I don't know if you want to take over.
Yeah, sure. That was really wonderful, Brittany. Absolutely. So powerful and so true that we are just devastating our ocean with fishing. To something I'll add to that is, fishing really is just hunting in the ocean. So because these are wild caught fish, right? So if someone is against hunting, then you should be against fishing too. It's the same thing. We're just hunting in the ocean. So just kind of keeping that in mind. But so the last time when I was on the Real Truth About Health conference last year, I gave a presentation on fish. So I encourage you to check that out if you want to get some greater detail. I go into some great detail. But what I'll talk about is the aquaculture and fishing, the fish farming. And it's really interesting because I have actually visited some fish farms. I don't know if anybody's ever been to a fish farm, but as you're walking up, so they have the fish in these small tanks, pools, and they're maybe the size of a hot tub, maybe a small swimming pool. And you're walking up and you see these pools and they're just black. They're like mud, very, very dark, right? The water is so dark, and they're often on a lake or at the ocean where you see the blue water, green water, or whatever the color of the water is supposed to be. And you see this black water. You're walking up and you look in and you suddenly realize that there are so many fish because they're just on top of each other and the water is just agitating, and they have them crammed in there where they can't even swim in a straight line. They're just on top of one another. And I think how just miserable that's got to be. And the reason that the water is so thick and muddy is that they're swimming in their own waste. They have just, they filled it with waste. It's miserable and horrible. And these places are known for having just a ton of pharmaceuticals and antibiotics and all kinds of chemicals that they dump in there, trying to keep the fish healthy enough to grow to a slaughter weight so they can kill them. It's really awful. And sea lice is another big issue. So sea lice is a problem in the ocean, but not, not horrible. But sea lice thrive in these fish farms. And sea lice actually, it eats away at the skin around the fish's eyes, around their head. It can just eat away their flesh. It's very painful, and fish do feel pain. That is absolutely determined by science. There's a wonderful book called What a Fish Knows by Jonathan Balcombe, where he talks about the numerous studies that they've done, and the scientific community has come to the overwhelming conclusion that yes, fish feel pain, absolutely. And so their flesh is just eaten away by the sea lice, and the sea lice just thrive in these horrible conditions because they can just jump right to the next fish, the next host fish. So they're really, really terrible. I think they have something like a 20% mortality rate before slaughter. So basically 20% of the fish are just going to die because it's such horrible conditions, and that's considered an acceptable loss. Really horrible stuff. And, we have to keep in mind that even though they're so kind of separate from us, so different from us, they live in a different world, they live in a different environment. Fish are our ancestors. They are they are animals. They're our kin, right? And we have to remember that they too are individuals. They are sentient. They are playful. They're amazing animals. And again, I'll just plug that book, What a Fish Knows. Wonderful studies around the individuality, the personalities of fishes, and just keeping in mind that they deserve to live just as much as a dog, a cat, a cow, a pig. So fish are incredible, incredible animals.
Yes, absolutely. Everything you said was perfect. Thank you, Hope. I completely agree with all of that. I want to mention one other thing about the oceans real quick is that forgot to mention earlier, but all of the pollution that is caused from the fishing industry also needs to be acknowledged, because there's so much trash. And I mean, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, there's like these huge areas of the ocean that are just, the trash just accumulates, and it's horrible. The fishing line, the hooks, all the nets discarded in the ocean, they end up tangling animals, tangling sea life. But not just for the animals themselves, but for our environment, the fishing industry is polluting it. I mean, our oceans are polluted from that industry, and there's just so much waste and trash that ends up in the ocean from it. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But yeah, Hope is right. Fish have every much of a right to live and be free from harm as cows, pigs, dogs, cats. And that is really the basis of speciesism. A fish is a dog, is a pig, is a cow, is a human. I mean, we're all earthlings. We're all living, breathing, feeling creatures. We're all capable of pain, fear, love, joy, and all of it. And so it's just really about trying to educate people, trying to dismantle speciesism, and trying to break down the walls of cognitive dissonance that have programmed us from birth, that have conditioned us to believe that other animals are inferior. We're all equal. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hands and then ask a brief question and go ahead. Okay, Kaylee, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Kaylee from Plainview, New York. I'd like to know what you guys know about family life of fish. I know that whales and dolphins have often saved the lives of the people who were lost out in sea and actually showed them the way back. But I don't know anything about the family life of fish that are not whales or dolphins. What can you tell me about that?
Sure, I could take that one. So interestingly, family life and caregiving of offspring is very complex with a lot of fish species. A lot of times we think that fish just lay eggs and go away, and the little fish, hatch and fend for themselves. And that is the case with some of the species. But other species, they have a lot of complexity around caregiving of their offspring. There's species that will build little protection nests and rafts around their eggs. There's others that will keep their eggs and their babies once they're born in their mouths for protection, right? And you can see these videos, these wonderful videos of like the little babies are just swimming around, and suddenly there's like oh, what's happening, like something danger. Mama will open her mouth and all the fishies go bloop, 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 bloop in her mouth for protection. And those fish actually, while that is happening, they will lose body weight because they're not eating at that time. They're just protecting their fish. They'll sometimes lose a great deal of their body weight because they're just taking care of their babies. So I'm trying to remember, there were some other wonderful stories about caregiving and parenting that I have in my presentation, but it's not coming to me now. But I will tell another story just to show the complexities of fish. And this one is about two little goldfish that were observed, and the story was told. And it was Blackie and Big Red, okay? And two little goldfish. Blackie was a little black moor goldfish, that's the species. And he was born a little wonky. He just kind of hopped around the bottom of his tank. He couldn't swim well. And he had a buddy, a friend in the tank with him, Big Red. And Big Red was just a gorgeous big golden fish, goldfish. So when it was time for feeding, and you drop the food in on the top of the tank and it kind of floats down, right? Big Red would swim under Blackie, and he would lift Blackie up and take him around to eat and let Blackie eat first. And then he gently put him back down, and then Big Red would go and eat for himself. And what a beautiful thing. So we're seeing caregiving and compassion and selflessness, right? Are those things you would have ever thought to think about fish, to put those words to a fish? Probably not. But now you've heard Blackie and Big Red's story, right? And this is the complexity that is in the fish community. On so many levels. They are individuals just like us. So, yeah.
So from your experience as some people who have been passionate about these issues in the past, you've given lectures before, you've spoken to people. What is happening? Like, what do politicians say? What does the news media say? What does the public say? Like, this isn't the first time we're discussing this. So there are influential people in the world. Do they hear you? Do they care? Like, what has been the response to your books, to your lectures, to your media tours? What happens when you tell people this stuff? What do they do? What happens?
Well, I think change is happening, just not as fast or as soon as we would like. And Hope can probably speak to this more because you've been in the movement a long time, longer than me. So you could probably speak it on that. But I will just say, from my observations, I think that in large part due to the climate crisis, this planetary crisis, like we are facing a planetary catastrophe, really. And so I think because of that, there are many people that are worried about their children's future and their grandchildren's future on this planet, that it's coming to a tipping point. Like, this is all building to a point where we cannot continue on this way. We cannot maintain this kind of system. Things have to change. Factory farming, first and foremost, has got to go. All animal agriculture needs to end. But the massive scale of harm that factory farming is causing to the water and the air and everything, the whole environment is really significant. It's major. So I think that there are many people who are realizing on a climate and environmental level that this kind of system just cannot continue. And so that, I think, is really waking a lot of people up. I would love to see everybody have compassion for animals and stop this horrific system for the animals. But like I said earlier, it's all connected. The environment, the animals, our health, you know, we are animals too. So it's all connected, and things really, really need to change. So hope you can take over.
Well, I'll just say, yeah, I have been observing the reaction and the how people feel about veganism for a very long time. For 30 years now, I've been kind of observing this in news and media, and I have seen a great deal of progress. Of course, we still have a long way to go, but that said, I love Time magazine. I love National Geographic. And over the years, I've seen a real shift in the consciousness, in the level of attention that's given to animals, to the vegan issue. I think it has been really positive in media. I'll give a couple of examples. I think it was in Time magazine. I can't remember if it was Time or National. I think it was Time. Fairly recently, they had what you can do to reduce your impact on climate change. Now, they've been doing this for maybe 10, 15, 20 years, right? Different environmental or just regular magazines, journals will have like the things you can do. And of course, those things are like, drive less or whatever they say, different, use the light bulbs, the better light bulbs, energy efficient light bulbs, or turn your water off while you're brushing your teeth, things like that, right? You never, hardly ever see anything about diet. Well, this list just recently, it had reduce or eliminate, I think it even said, or eliminate animal products or meat from your diet. And it was like one of the top 3 things. I was shocked. I was like, wow, amazing. Thank you. So it is happening. Another one that I saw in National Geographic, I actually see a lot in National Geographic that it used to be that kind of only the large fauna would get attention in so much that they would like a story about a lion or a story about a koala bear or something like that would get kind of the attention, and maybe they would say he or she about the animal instead of calling the animal it, things like that, the things that using species as language. But I saw this wonderful article recently about spiders that dream. And there was this wonderful biologist, researcher that was studying spiders, and she found that they actually dream. She, concluded that they dream. And it said something in the article like, well, if spiders dream, maybe we'll think twice before stepping on them or squishing them or something like that, And so this consciousness is really starting to raise around animals, around their individuality, around their right to live free of suffering. So I think there's some beautiful progress that you can see if you really look for it.
Okay, I want to thank both of you very much for joining us tonight. We very much appreciate it if we could unmute everyone's mic so everyone can join me in letting Brittany and Hope know that we appreciate them speaking tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Love you.
And I'm gonna do with
Amazing.
Thank you.
That was great.
pretty much
We're
it. The other thing
heroes.
is I do like the charcoal cultures.
To the girls now.